everyone. This is Alicia, and welcome back to the Evening Podcast. This week has been pretty intense, or this past week. We're now going into a new week, but it's just been one thing after the other, right? We just feel like, okay, oh my gosh, like when does it end, right? And I was thinking about that all day today. I was just like, I just feel like every time we think we could possibly have some peace, something else pops up, right? And I came across this article and I was like, oh my gosh, this is wild. So, this is from Psychology Today. And the title of the article is America the Anxious. And it says, Why Americans Are Some of the Most Stressed Out Humans on Earth. And I was like, wow, that tracks major because I feel like we are so stressed out with all the things that are going on in this country, around the world. Um, and in some ways, it seems like there's no relief in sight. Even though we know that things will eventually come to an end, still, while you're in all the chaos, it just feels like it's never ending. So, in this article, they gave some key points at the start of the article. It says Americans are experiencing historically high anxiety levels. Anxiety is triggered by both real and perceived threats. Evolutionary survival skills contribute to modern anxiety. Modern societal pressures exacerbate chronic anxiety. So the article starts off, it says, every morning brings a new headline, a fresh worry, and a creeping sense that the world is shifting beneath our feet. From the rising costs to social tensions to 24/7 new cycles that never end, Americans are feeling it in our cores. I'm sorry. Anxiety has become a part of our everyday lives. More than half of adults report clinical levels of anxiety, and more than half report feeling more anxious now than they did a year ago. 1 in 5 adults living with a diagnosed anxiety disorder. That's wild. Across the country, millions struggle with restless nights, racing thoughts, and a deep feeling of unease. We are among the most anxious human beings on the planet, a quiet reflection of the times we are living in. The statistics are staggering. 73% of American adults report experiencing elevated levels of anxiety related to the U.S. political climate, with many describing their feelings as anxious, exhausted, and even angry. A recent mental health poll indicates that 67% of U.S. adults also report feeling anxious about global events, including concerns about the economy, safety, and climate change. Additionally, 70% of Americans report experiencing high levels of financial anxiety. Across the nation, people report the same restless nights, racing thoughts, and tight chests. It is as if the air itself is charged with uncertainty, leaving the American people more anxious than ever. It is essential then, considering that levels of anxiety in this country have risen to epidemic levels, to understand what anxiety actually is. Anxiety can be understood as the psychological alarm system that signals uncertainty and warns us of unsafe conditions. We rely on this psychological alarm system, which has developed over years of evolution to manage fear, anticipate danger, and maintain our safety. From the earliest moments of human history, our survival as a species has involved a delicate balance with uncertainty. Our ancestors navigated shifting climates, scarce resources, and constant threats from predators and rival groups. It was within these unpredicted environments that the human brain evolved powerful mechanisms to improve the odds of survival. These instincts, or survival instincts, resulted in the desire for clarity, certainty, and safety that are currently embedded in our psychology today. These instincts shape everything from our social behaviors to our political and economic choices. Modern anxiety. Why ancient instincts clash with today's world. Today, our brains are responding to both a world that is familiar and one that is unprecedented. Many Americans face very real, tangible threats, including financial insecurity, unsafe neighborhoods, and the impact of climate change, which all trigger general stress and fear. At the same time, our brains are fed a constant stream of information from the news, social media, and global events, which then result in a relentless, stream of perceived danger. The same alarm system we once relied on as a species to survive immediate threats is now reacting to financial worries, social upheaval, and political uncertainty with the same intensity. This dynamic combination of real perceived threats keeps our bodies and minds in a near constant state of alert. This results in millions of Americans feeling tense, restless, and overwhelmed. Why modern American life keeps us on the edge? Our brains evolved to respond to immediate threats, but modern threat presents a constant barrage of challenges, many of which are systemic and ongoing. Economic pressure is one of the most pervasive experiences for Americans. The rising cost of living, mounting debt, and stress of navigating a healthcare system that is often overwhelming and inaccessible are very real stressors for millions. Financial instability isn't hypothetical, it's a daily reality that keeps the alarm system in high gear. The tangible social tensions present in this country also adds another layer of pressure. The country is deeply divided by ideology, culture, and policy, and it is impossible to tune out the debates that touch on the core of our values, identities, and even our personal safety. We are exposed to a 24/7 news cycle and never ending stream of social media, and our brains are repeatedly inundated with uncertainty, danger, and instability. Our survival instincts evolved to address short term threats that our ancestors faced, yet, modern stressors are persistent, abstract, and interconnected. This results in an ongoing sense of vigilance that wears down our minds and bodies. For those whose day to day lives feel relatively safe, cultural expectations amplify anxiety. The pressure to succeed, achieve, and stay creates a quiet tension. Our brains are wired to seek clarity and security, but this pressure is interpreted as a threat to our survival. We interpret these pressures as life or death in a literal sense, even when they aren't. It is the combination of these very real threats and constant societal stressors that help explain why Americans report some of the highest levels of anxiety in the world. It is our evolutionary instincts combined with the modern life's relentless uncertainties that results in millions of people in a state of chronic anxiety. And I will share this actual article in the show notes. It was written by Whitney Carlson. She's a New York based psychotherapist and counselor um, at Mood Lab. And I really, enjoyed reading this article because it kind of like puts you in a mode like where you're kind of like stepping out of yourself and just observing all the things that you might have been internalizing uh, by way of being, an American living in this country, right? But I wanted to just, like I said, I wanted to share this with everyone because it's always good to see things written down or just, see that what you are feeling is not just something like, oh my God, is it just me? No, this is a lot of folks here in the United States of America. It said, let me go back up here at the top. It said 70% of Americans report experiencing high levels of financial anxiety. And then it says, a recent mental health poll indicates that 67% of adults also reported feeling anxious about global events, including concerns about the economy, safety, and climate change. And then when you go up further, it says 73% of American adults report experiencing elevated levels of anxiety to the U.S. political climate, which many describe their feelings as anxious, exhausted, and even angry. Now, this actual article was written in September of this year. I would be interested to see what those numbers look like now, those percentage numbers, as it relates to all those things. because right now, the weight of this country is so heavy. It is just it's just wild. It's out of control, right? Um, but then I was also reading, different another article that was different or not so much different, but it was kind of like help trying to provide uh tips for those who are experiencing this anxiety that we have been basically fed in so many ways, and we're experiencing the anxiety based off of, I shouldn't say we were fed, but basically we have been kind of like bombarded with all this by way of the state of our country, if that makes sense. But the article that I was reading earlier, it was providing just some tips on how to get through emotional exhaustion. And so emotional exhaustion, um, you know, the definition they provided in this particular article focused more on your personal life as well as things that happen in your work life. And this is personal, what we're talking about here, this anxiety in America. And I can share that information in the show notes with y'all as well. And it's basically just, things that we think of um, in terms of like self help, right? How we can help ourselves, you know, how we can do that is by like basically removing ourselves from certain situations, uh, refraining from, watching and consuming a lot of news, social media, because that stuff can, lead to just overwhelm and to a point where we're just completely detached from the, very serious things that are happening in this country. Uh, we get so overwhelmed that it's just like, oh, another day, another day. Even though internally we're like losing it, but it's just like, yep, yep, that sounds about right, right? Um, so I will share that article as well because I think it's very helpful to just have like some quick go tos that can help with your situation. Um, and one thing I did enjoy, they had a whole section about mindfulness, like meditation and yoga and stuff like that. I love hot yoga every Sunday for the most part. I have been going to hot yoga, um, and it has been so helpful uh, with me kind of like grounding myself and centering myself. It's a game changer. So, and that might not be for you. You might find something else that helps you in the process of, trying to reduce that anxiety and, not be so overwhelmed uh, by way of the things that are happening here in this country. So yeah, I will share both of those articles here in the show notes for this episode. But I just want to encourage you all, do your best to find joy, however that looks for you. Because if we're constantly being bombarded with what we are seeing and hearing in this country about the state of this country, we will be emotionally exhausted. We will have, or continue to have increased anxiety. And so it is important for us to, like I said, find that joy and also find ways to remove ourselves from all this when it just becomes too much, or remove ourselves prior so we're not actually getting to a point where it's like, I am completely burnt out. I've got nothing else to give, right? Yeah, it's a wild time, y'all, but we have to do our best to stay as grounded as possible and be human and be kind. I can't stress that enough. So, like I said, I'll share this information in the show notes. I love you guys. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Eating Podcast. I will see y'all next week. All right. Love you. Bye.